There's a version of you, or someone you know really well, who hears good news and immediately starts looking for the catch. Someone offers help and the first thought isn't gratitude, it's why. And that pattern, it didn't come from nowhere. Think about the last time someone was unexpectedly kind to you. A stranger, a colleague, someone who had no obvious reason to help. There's a decent chance your first instinct wasn't to just accept it. Something in you went looking for the angle. And if you're honest about it, that search happened fast, faster than the gratitude did. When researchers talk about dispositional skepticism as a personality trait rather than a one-off reaction, they're describing something more specific than just being a pessimist. It's a cognitive style, a way the brain has been tuned over time to process information about other people's motives. The tuning happened for a reason. What's fascinating here is that the human brain doesn't distinguish particularly well between a threat that happened once and a threat that might happen again. That's not a flaw in the design. It's working exactly as intended. If you touched a hot stove as a kid, your brain didn't wait for a second burn before it started treating stoves differently. Interpersonal betrayal runs in the same manner. If someone grew up in an environment where the adults around them were unpredictable emotionally, logistically, in whatever way, the child's brain adapted. It started scanning. It started building pattern recognition around other people's behavior so that the next thing didn't arrive as a complete ambush. And I think people genuinely underestimate how sophisticated that adaptation is. A kid who can tell by the way a door closes whether tonight is going to be okay is not paranoia. That's finely tuned threat detection. The problem is that the system doesn't come with an off switch. It doesn't automatically recalibrate when the environment changes. So the adult version of that person sits across from someone on a first date, and somewhere underneath the conversation, underneath the eye contact and the small talk, the scanner is still running. The same one from when they were 9. It doesn't announce itself as old survival code. It presents as intuition, as realism, as being smart enough to see what other people are too naive to notice. And the thing is, from the outside, it can look like arrogance, like someone who just refuses to let people in. But spend enough time actually talking to someone like this, and what you find underneath the surface-level guardedness is usually something a lot quieter than arrogance. It's someone who has been surprised before. Not once. Enough times that surprise itself started to feel like a warning sign. Like warmth and openness were just the setup for something they hadn't seen coming yet. And here's where it gets strange. There's a concept in social psychology called behavioral confirmation. The short version, our expectations about people shape how we behave toward them, and that behavior often draws out the very response we were expecting. When you're anticipating distance from someone, you give a little less warmth first. You reread a text 3 times before replying because you're trying to figure out what they really meant. You don't fully invest in the relationship because committing to something that's probably going to fall apart anyway feels like a bad bet. The other person registers that coolness, consciously or not, and matches it. Now the relationship has exactly the emotional temperature you predicted it would. The skeptic points to that outcome as proof. See, I knew it. And they're not wrong that it happened. They just don't have full visibility into the part they played in producing it. This dynamic was documented by Mark Swanin and William Swan in a 1978 study. The finding essentially is that social reality is partly constructed by the people observing it, which is a deeply uncomfortable idea if you think on it long enough. Because I want to talk about the interior of this for a minute. It doesn't feel like fear. It feels like clarity. Like being one of the few people who hasn't been lulled into some comfortable, convenient version of reality. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes with it, though. One that doesn't get named very often. Because when you're always anticipating the turn, you're never fully present when things are actually fine. The good moments get experienced at a slight remove. Someone tells you they love you, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you're already logging it as data, filing it away, half wondering what the context will look like when that sentence eventually gets used differently. You're not necessarily wanting to think like that. But the other side to this, skepticism, real calibrated skepticism, is a form of intelligence. People who have developed this orientation are often harder to manipulate. They catch inconsistencies that slip past everyone else. They ask the questions that need asking. They don't extend trust reflexively, which means when they do extend it, it tends to mean something. That's worth saying clearly because most content about this frames it as pure dysfunction. The issue is sensitivity, not the trait itself. A smoke detector is extraordinarily useful. If it goes off every time you make toast, you don't rip it off the ceiling. You recalibrate it for the environment you're actually in, not the one it was first installed for. This is where I'd usually be expected to offer something clean and resolved. I'm not going to because it wouldn't be accurate. What research and clinical work both point to is something called repeated confirmation. The accumulated experience of extending trust in a small boundaried way, having that trust honored, and doing it again. Not a revelation, actual lived experience, slowly building a counter-narrative to the one the brain has been living for years. The brain learns through experience. It unlearns through experience too. There is no version of this that bypasses the actual living of it. A therapist once framed it in a way I haven't been able to shake. The goal isn't to become a trusting person. It's to become someone who can afford to be wrong about a person occasionally without that meaning their entire judgment is broken. Because for someone carrying this, being wrong about a person doesn't feel like a minor miscalculation. It feels like evidence. Evidence that they are at some fundamental level unsafe to trust even themselves. That's the weight underneath it. That's what the scanner is actually protecting. If you recognize something in this, in the loop, in the distance, in the way good things get held at arm's length, I'd just ask you to consider one thing. The pattern made sense once, probably completely. The question is just whether it's still working for you, or whether at this point it's mostly working on you. That's not a rhetorical question. It's worth actually answering. A lot of people who resonate with this kind of content are dealing with something that's harder to name than just stress. It's more like a constant low-level vigilance that never fully powers down. And that state, over time, absolutely wrecks your sleep, fragments your focus, and keeps your nervous system stuck in a mode it was never meant to stay in permanently. There's a link in the description and pinned comment to a bundle I genuinely think is worth your time. It's a collection of 7-day guides built around the specific things that tend to pile up for people watching. Resetting your sleep properly, rather than just thinking about resetting it. Rebuilding your focus. Rebalancing your dopamine so your brain stops reaching for noise every time things get quiet. Each guide gives you a concrete daily action, not just more information to absorb and do nothing with. That part matters. It's in the pinned comment too. And if you want more on the psychology of how we relate to other people, why we pull away, why we test people, why closeness can feel like risk, subscribe and hit the notification bell. That's exactly the kind of thing I love.